Hey everybody, welcome to the next part of the initiation course on ZBrush. Here we're going to be explaining the interface of the program and where everything is positioned. Are you ready? The first thing you'll see is that the program has a pretty different interface to what an interface in a traditional 3D program might look like. You'll see that there are no windows where you can see the different views. This doesn't exist in ZBrush, and in the end, you'll see that it's all quite different. Here, to start with, when we opened up the program, we can see the lightbox opens up. The lightbox is a series of panels where we have different elements to start working with the program. Normally, we can start to work on a project. As you can see in project, we can open up some kind of sphere to start moving. At the end, we also have the Quicksave that lets us quicksave the latest things we do in ZBrush. Every 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to have an automatic save of the work we're doing to make safe copies. To start with, we'll put in a sphere. This one, to start the program. As you can see, this is just a preview. We don't have split views, so to start, what we can do is take out the perspective. With this button here. Normally, with ZBrush, we would work without a perspective and later look over the work we're doing, activating the perspective. Here we have a line with different elements, and everything you can see here, it's also in the side panels. The side panels are these ones here, both this one and this one here. We can take each element and place them in the panels. For example, we can take the Documents panel and place them in the side panel. Okay, all of this can be seen in the course. Now we can proceed to explain the interface a little bit. Here, first we have the Project Master option. We're not going to use this option too much because it's not really used these days. It was used a lot early on, but now we use other things. Basically speaking, it's to make model projections. For example, we have an alpha with a concrete shape. We can project that shape on the surface of the sphere in this case. As we've seen, the lightbox is this shortcut panel with different elements. Then we have Quick Sketch that we're not going to use at all, so just forget it. Later we have these buttons here that are very important. The Edit button to edit our object. The Draw button to start painting and to make sculptures of our object. And finally, the Move button, Scale, and Rotation button as well. When we activate one of these elements, we get this visor. First, we'll take away the symmetry with the X key. And as I said, this visor is useful to move the object. This transpose is a gizmo that once we use, we'll see that it's quite useful. In the beginning, it could be a little difficult to understand, but later we'll pick it up pretty easily. If we have this sphere, we click here and we move the mouse, you'll see that this arrow gets longer. If we hit Shift, as you can see, we mark a degree concretely. From here, with the central button, we can move the sphere. From one end, we can deform it. And from this point here, we can make a kind of clip. If on the contrary, we want to mark scale, and we do the same, so we click and drag the mouse, we'll see that one exterior point, we're going to make a global scale. From the middle point, we make a scale, but on another point of view. Because if we grab this line and put it here, and now I scale, you'll see that everything's depending on where I place the transpose anchor points. From this point here, we can make a scale from this axis, as if it were an axis, okay? And with this key, obviously, from the middle point, we can make a line, and from here, we can spin the sphere. If we want to turn it from another side, we go to the top perspective, click, and with Shift, we mark so that the transpose line is stuck. And now from here, we can turn it, okay? What we have to do with this is put in a sphere and practice a lot, seeing as it's pretty basic to understand how Gizmo or Transpose works. I can make this small introduction, but it's up to you to work on it to learn how it works. Okay, now if we hit the draw key, we activate these panels here, and they're also very important. These here are the material buttons. This one here is the material, the color, and the color material. Obviously, it's not the same to work with color as it is to work with materials. We can paint a sphere in blue, but the material would still be metallic. So, with this, we can work on different kinds of things. If we activate this channel, mRGB, we'll make both a color and a material. We'll explain this deeper further on. Here we have the sculpt functions. Now, I have the standard brush equipped. If I move the mouse over here, obviously what I'm doing is sculpting. As I'm adding, what I'm actually doing is adding geometry, because we have the Z add activated. If I activate Z sub, what I'm doing is eliminating materials. To work with this in a more concise manner, what we do is have shortcuts with the Alt key. If I have the Z sub activated, I'm just eliminating material. But if I hit the Alt key, we'll see that now I'm adding material, okay? This will be the shortcut. This here, on the other side, is the intensity of the effect. Obviously, if I increase the parameter here, the effect will be stronger. It's very important to keep working on this. With the spacebar, what we have is the shortcut to all of this. If we hit it, we can choose the brushes, colors, alphas, the brush diameter, the focal point of the brush, the intensity of the brush. You can also see all of the elements I just explained. Here it's the same. The brush, can you see? The focal point, the size, and all of this with the spacebar will be much easier accessed. Here we have a points visor and the total polygons and also the total in the scene. If we have more elements, here we'll have the selected element and here the total of elements in the scene. Here you have the brush we're using. If we click here, we'll open a panel with all the available brushes that are also ordered by letters. We can go to the I letter and see what we've got. Here we have the type of brushes, how it will be and how we'll use it on the surface. We can use a freehand, a color spray. If now we hold, I'm just going to change some things here, make this a bit stronger and make the brush smaller. Alright, so now if I hold, you can see the effect. If instead of choosing color spray, I use the dots, the effect will be different. Everything here, you have to work on it to see what each thing does. For example, this one here, drag rect, is used a lot to add in the alpha. For example, open an alpha. For example, this star. With this, what we'll make is a kind of stamp. If I click here, as you'll see, I'm marking a star on the surface. It looks a bit bad because we're missing subdivision levels and the sphere. We're just explaining the interface and we'll see this further on. Here we have the texture that we'll see further on, and here we have the material. In this panel we have the pre-made materials, and here we have the standard materials, which ones we can work. We can apply, for example, the same material and see how the color changes on the sphere's material. We can also put in a metallic tone as an example. Here we have a color theme that we'll see further on. And now we move on to this other panel. Here we have a shortcut to the render preview. Simply click, and we get the first image generated by the computer. Here we have the option to move the document. If I press this button, you'll see we move the document. Here you have the perspective, normally to model in Z. We work without perspective. Later, to see what our figure looks like, we'll activate the perspective. This is the floor that we can place as well on different planes. See? Here we have similar options of symmetries that we're not going to touch for now. Here we have the option to place a figure. I mean, if we have the figure lost here and we don't know where it is, we have to press this frame button and the figure will be centered in the camera. Okay, this is to move the camera, to zoom in and turn it in the same way that we can click outside the model. If we click out of the model and with Shift held, we center the figure in different positions. Here we have the polyframe activation. We'll use this later on to see how the net on our model looks. The transparency and the ghost is for when we have different elements so we can work without anything getting in our way. For example, if we had a character that's wearing a jacket and we want to model the torso but we can't see it because the jacket's covering it, it just makes it easier to work. And then the expose is giving us the possibility to separate all of the elements to be able to see them better. Later, hitting click on the button again, we go back to joining all the elements. It's simply used for that. Okay, later we have here the panels here that, as I've said, are the shortcuts of the panels here. For example, we have File where we can open our document and make other things. The Tool panel, that's very important, that we will use more, with a difference. It's the one we're most going to use. Here is all of the program's strength. We have another panel here that's for exporting and importing elements in OBJ or for another type of program. We can add in more elements. Here we have the subtool, and as you can see, we have a kind of layer that aren't layers. Careful, unless we work with booleans, these are not layers. This panel is a kind of visualize of the elements we have. For example, if we insert another cube, well, now the sphere isn't visible because it's in the cube. But we can move the sphere. Look here in this panel. We'll see each of the elements I'm putting in. All of the elements are the subtools that are added to the scene positioned on this panel. This is to increase or decrease the objects. This here is to name them. And these are different shortcuts to give the object the maximum or minimum detail. Copy, duplicate, eliminate, insert objects, add objects. It has a ton of functions. Here, for example, we have some more little concrete things. I won't go into much detail, but they are very concrete things. For example, merge to join the objects up, remesh. The project function, that's to make projections and get an optimal level of geometry of a subtool that does not have many polygons thanks to another subtool with much more geometry. So we make a kind of projection between the two elements, one with a lot of geometry and another one with less. We join them to create an intermediate between the two. This, anyway, is something that's a little more extensive that we'll explain on another occasion. We'll have the extract function, which is to extract material through a mask selection. Here we have the geometry. That's also very important, and we're going to be using it a lot. Basically, if we want to click here, we're going to see that more subdivisions are added to the model. From here, we can go on lowering or increasing the subdivision level. If I work with more subdivision, look what happens. For example, if I make a star on this level of subdivision, if the level of subdivision is higher, the details are larger. the dynamic subdivision is something we're going to see later. This is very important, Dynamesh and ZRemesh. We're going to explain this later because they're very important. Dynamesh allows us basically to update the geometry. So we'll grab the brush, for example, move. I'm going to get this element. Obviously, we'll reach a moment where the net is so stretched that it's lost and we lose the details. The net is just untreatable like this. If we have Dynamesh activated, holding control and clicking and moving the mouse out of the model, you'll see that we get an updated net. We'll work more on this later on. ZRemesh is to make an optimization of the net. It's similar to Dynamesh, but it works differently. The end game is to reduce the polygons. If I apply the ZRemesh, you'll see that I have also managed to optimize the mesh. And the program is a bit more coherent when doing it. Let's go to the bottom of the panel. And we're going to position the image here, so you can see more important things. As you can see, we have more important panels like the polygroups that we'll work later with a bit more detail. As you can see, when I activate the mesh, an element we'll see is the colors. Okay, these colors are the polygroups. The polygroups are a kind of selection of polygons that we can later apply to many things, whether selecting the elements to decide the material we'll use on the elements, or for working on an object on another program. We'll use these polygroups a lot. Here we also have this panel where we'll have the modifiers a little more directly that we can apply to the model. For example, we have this here, and we can apply, for example, a bevel, or we can make it more of a sphere with a different axis. We can make it more spherical. I can make it a concrete size. Yep. As you can see, working with this and the different axes, we can get different looks. We'll use this sometimes. Well, there's not much more to explain on the topic of the interface. This is a complex program. I can give you a short introduction, but it's in the practice where you'll start to learn the dynamics of the program and to work with ZBrush's workflow. So yeah, we'll leave this little introduction on ZBrush's interface here, and in the next lesson we'll start on a concrete exercise to start to see all of these elements at work. So yeah. Okay, before we finish this lesson, I want to tell you guys that I'm going to give you guys 2 files on the ZBrush interface. In this case, versions 7 and 8 of the program. This way, you can load the interface that you want and the one that I use to work professionally. To change this, if I haven't already said, simply go to the Preferences, Configuration, and here, Load UI. Load this file that I'm sending you or any other that you might have. We'll hit Open and we'll leave the program and we'll go back in. When we go back in, the interface will have been placed. As I've said, I'm going to give you the interface of ZBrush 7 that I use and ZBrush 8. Okay? So yeah, we'll leave this here and we'll go into the next lesson. See ya!